joining us for this amazing, awesome,
long
overdue episode of
Wine with Dr.
Woodley
Woodley.
Wednesday. Thank you, Dr. Woodley, Dr. Katie, for joining us here this evening.
It's always so good to
we have
see
a
you.
very important topic to talk about, guys. It's all about free feeding our cats, which is a huge controversial issue. And that's why we're bringing the expert, Dr. Katie Woodley, the natural pet doctor, on. Can we start by saying what kind of wine we're drinking tonight? Because I just took my first sip and mine is delicious.
Mine's delicious too. I am drinking a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, my favorite type of Sav.
My favorite type of
New
Sav.
Zealand.
Don't like those California Savs.
I am drinking what is it? Chateau Michel. Indian Wells.
You gotta say it like with a little.
Merlot.
Is that French, right? Is it
Merlot.
French?
Yeah.
2018 Merlot. Oh, it's so good. I had
She's
no
just
idea.
gonna
I was
drink
like,
it
I have
from
one
the
bottle. She was like, "Do you have wine?" And I was like, "There's one bottle left in there somewhere." And I grabbed it. It was a good one for tonight. Good one and good topic. So
This
cheers,
is such a great
everyone.
topic. You guys, I have to say, Dr. Katie, we posted a cat tip. Cheers, love. It's been a while ago, and we were supposed to do this a while ago. This has kind of been bumped out about a month, and it has received millions of views. And a lot of it really is a lot of the comments that we received made us decide that this is a really good topic to kind of dive into because it's apparently very controversial.
Yes.
So
let's start
everyone.
let's start with three basic questions. Dr. Katie, I would like just your basic overview answer. She doesn't know these questions yet because she didn't look at her text messages. But
She's a busy woman.
She is a busy woman. But I'm gonna ask these simple questions and then we'll go back into depth for each one. So you guys can know a little bit more about and kind of debunk the myth or not of free feeding for cats. Okay. First, do you believe that cats should be free fed in order to not develop food aggression?
I disagree with that statement.
Okay.
So
You're like,
I'm gonna go. Do you want me to go in depth with it? So I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, for me, seeing the research and also looking at how natural behaviors in the wild and natural feeding behaviors in the wild for cats, in terms of a food aggression type, if we think about having a resource down and guarding and things that can happen with cats, there's going to be more potentially of an issue. So when we look at that versus if we were to put down food, have them eat, and then they're done eating, their meals are done, there's no resource guarding potentially or other issues that can come up with this.
That's a very good point. You would think that it would actually be opposite, that they would develop more food aggression than the other. Okay. Second question, considering that over 60% of cats are obese, do you believe that free feeding could be a contributing factor to that?
About 2 million%, yes. So 2 million%, yes.
Okay. We'll go into detail in a little bit about that. And then also this very important question for our viewers, right? So they can get the research, as you said. Are there research studies that show the effects of free feeding versus scheduled feedings?
Yes, there are studies.
Okay, perfect.
I love this. So one of the reasons that we decided to do this was because there was so much blowback. I love this one guy that commented that said, everybody mad defensive in the comments with no knowledge. She's not lying. When Jay in her cat tip said, basically
stop free feeding
and do scheduled routine meals. And he said, cats are hunters and having access to constant food is not in their nature. They will overeat. Interestingly enough, a lot of people were saying that cats need to have an all-day buffet out for them because they need to hunt whenever they're hungry. What say you?
Which is kind of a good,
it's an interesting concept when you think about, so if we're thinking we have food down all of the time, for one, as a veterinarian, I look at, what type of food can we put down all the time? So if we're having behavior issues where there's aggression and we're seeing problems there, I'd be looking at, what's this food doing to the microbiome, to the gut-brain axis, creating inflammation in the body? So I know that has, kind of, I don't want to say nothing to do with scheduled feeding, but it does, because we can only put down dry food for the entire day. and it's high carbohydrate, it's highly processed, it's highly inflammatory, and it creates all sorts of health issues. So what on the flip side of this, when we look at like the natural behaviors that cats like display when they're out in the wild, right? They're typically going to eat about 8 to 9 mice a day. Like they're hunting, they're going to sleep, they're going to, play. But when we have food down all the time, we actually that environmental enrichment aspect goes down. We're not actually helping that natural prey behavior because now it's just a resource that's there all the time. And so we're taking that away from what cats were essentially made to do and their like primal instinct behaviors. I feel like if we're having issues with behavior problems, if we're having issues with obesity, if we're having issues that are like health problems, we have to look at, well, what type of food are we feeding? And that right there is a huge issue that's creating a lot of these problems in the first place.
Yeah, I know so many people were saying like my cat would, and when I've tried to not put down food all day, or when I've picked it up, or when their bowl is empty, they get angry, they start starving. And that was one of the things like, oh my God, are you saying we need to starve our cats? Like, no.
My cat needs
Routine
to see the
scheduled
kibbles
feeding.
in the bowl.
Like you're still feeding your cat. Like we're not starving them, but we're also looking at what are the natural behaviors of these cats. And so we're taking essentially that all day buffet and we're creating time scheduled feedings. So that way we're mimicking what they would normally be doing and what they're made to do. Because when you think about how many cats, and we haven't gotten to that question yet, like the obesity thing, but how many cats, scarf and barf, right? And their stomachs aren't made for these all day feasts, and they're not good at regulating the amount of food that they're taking in. And so
here's the blowback on that, because this is, let me see if I can find it real quick. Basically the comments were that if you feed a cat on a routine mealtime, they will, and not have food down all the time, that's what causes scarf and barfing. So they will hoover down as much food as they can and then immediately throw it up. I think the comment was something of the effect of, if you want me to stop free feeding, come and clean my couch when they throw up all over my couch.
Scarf up all their food.
So, I mean, here's the other thing. So with scarf and barfing, how much food are we feeding? Are we able to break those down into smaller meals? And two, what's going on with your gut health? Like, that's the other thing. If your cat's constantly bringing up food and fur balls and, all sorts of things, that's not a normal thing. So if you're putting down a large amount of highly processed food and you're expecting them to eat like the amount of the all day buffet in 2 settings, that's probably, you're already probably overfeeding them, to be honest, because we're just so used to dumping food into the food bowl. Right. How many, maybe you are measuring, but also too, if you're measuring and you're following a lot of these guidelines on the backs of the food bags, you're already overfeeding, because a lot of times we're not doing the environmental enrichment component where we're playing with them, we're getting them moving and active. So we're probably already feeding over 10% of what they require. And then two, guess what? Unfortunately, the pet food industry wants you to go through food faster. So those requirements, the requirements listed for your cat's body weight, a lot of times is too high. And also, if you're feeding based off of an overweight body condition and not ideal body condition, you're already feeding them too much. So we're setting them up for a scarf and barf. So we need to look at all these different factors and assess, like, what do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? And those would be great starting places that people can go to help avoid that. Because I promise you, I hate cleaning up cat vomit, right? None of us like it, but there's things that we can do to mitigate that from happening.
Yeah. And I would also submit that neither do the cats actually like to vomit.
No, it's awful watching them, It's so awful watching your cat vomit. It's like the most painful thing to watch. So, but there's things we can do. And, this is such an important conversation because the free feeding is only leading to health problems down the road. And if we need to change that, we need to change the way people think about feeding our cats in order to keep them healthy or make sure we avoid disease down the road.
Yeah.
Well, I think that too.
Like obesity.
Right. Well, and I think that too kind of opens up the conversation too about what longevity is. I know a lot of people in the comments were saying, I free fed my cat their entire life. They're 7 years old and completely healthy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, at 7 years old, I mean, they're
young. 7 is young for a cat, or it should be, but it's become the time, right? where they're a senior now because in the vet world, we've identified these animals that are on processed food diet. So of course, 7 seems like old, right? We get to 13 and we're excited, but really we should be excited when we get cats to 25, when we get cats to 30 years old. And it comes down to, feeding them appropriately and supporting their systems. Furball.
Funny is very comfortable right here. Look at this girl.
She's doing a little bit of loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I'm sorry, I'm just now starting to look at the comments. This is such an exciting topic. But Nina did also mention that it's good to use a food puzzle if you have scarf and barf issues. And I want to kind of piggyback this on top of a lot of comments that we received were borderline super rude, but also they were like, well, that's awesome if all you can do is stay home and feed your cats all day, right?
Yeah, the timing,
the timing,
the
of
convenience.
things. Right. Mm-hmm. So that whole, let me see if I can ask the question in a more direct way. A lot of people are like, a lot of people think that they cannot feed on a routine basis due to certain schedules. And I understand there are people that do have shift work and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, yes, cats in the wild are designed to have smaller meals throughout the day, right? So it's kind of like what am I supposed to do? I can only feed at 6 a.m. and then at 9 o'clock at night when I finally get home from a crazy shift. In the meantime, what are some things that we can do for that enrichment? The puzzle feeders that Nina mentioned.
There's so many, you know what? The reason that so many brilliant companies have come out with things like automatic feeders, indoor hunting feeders, things like this is because of this specific question that you're asking, this specific topic.
How can we give our cats good routines that also implement enrichment without leaving an all-day buffet?
But real quick, because I kind of want to, like, before you answer this, because I also want to talk. I don't know how much research you've done or how much research there is even out there. I know there is some about the circadian rhythm and like the fact that cats often do eat at dawn and dusk in the wild. But is it are cats going to die if they eat twice a day versus multiple meals that mirrors that 8 to 9 mice throughout the day?
No, I mean, here's the thing, like when we're separating out feeding, and I think too, like, just to touch on what Adrian was saying, there's different ways to feed. And this is where, like, even for our own cats, like I use freeze dried also, like there are good quality foods that aren't kibble that you can still put down or put into, some of these great environmental enrichment resources that you can have down for them during the day if you're away. So you can still reduce the amount of food that you're feeding at either end. And then you can have some of this environmental enrichment for your cat to enjoy when you're at work. But you're still giving them nutrition and support. I think the bigger thing that comes down to this like topic that I always go back to is just like what our cats are made to eat. And, when we're, like I said at the very beginning, if you're free feeding, you're most likely feeding kibble, like, because I can't put down raw food and expect it to be good for my cats at the end of the day. Right. Like, hopefully not, it's not going to be very pleasant.
Or even canned food.
Well, yeah, and canned food, I would almost think is kind of worse because it's just there's more stuff in canned food, right? Mm-hmm. I saw a comment about, they get more aggressive with canned food, and this goes to like, okay, well, what's in the canned food? Is it creating a sugar rush? Is there a lot of carbohydrates or preservatives or things that are making them have that, blood sugar spike? And that's why they're getting kind of crazy and we're creating insulin resistance, when we're doing that. So I think that's something too to think about when we're thinking about this. Like, what are our cats doing when we're changing their eating patterns, when we're changing the types of foods? Those can give us insight into what's going on internally. It's not just about, spacing out these meals every few hours. There's a lot more here to unpack, right?
Yeah. And I agree. Rob, I love you, Rob. He posted a comment too. He said basically exactly what you said, Dr. Katie. There's no pretty guy in the back of our food packaging to tell us how much to eat. We figure it out for ourselves. The same with commercial cat food. Ignore what it says because it's geared to get you to overfeed and we'll spend a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just observe their feeding and dial it in from there for the proper amount of each meal. I've learned by backing off
Yes.
incrementally from the scarf and barf threshold. And I think that's a really good point because even with our Jack and Madison, they're the ones that are such a great comparison for this. They're siblings, but to this day, Jack will still eat almost twice as much as his sister Madison will. And they're both healthy weights, healthy cats. But it is about.
But he also moves
He
a
moves a little
lot
bit
more
more.
than she does. He's also much more active
Right.
than she is.
Right.
Yes.
And I think, and Robin here, hey, Robin, my babies eat twice a day and they're healthy as all get out. Of course, it is measured raw food. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that, I think what we found in all those comments, this video got millions of views and so many of them were very defensive comments. My vet said, I need to leave. A couple of them. It's funny because my vet recommends to give them 24/7 access to food. The one time I tried to put them on a food schedule, they were anxious and their behavior went back and forth. I work for a vet who said it's just fine with free feeding. Going to stick with her very educated advice and well-tried experience. 100% disagree with this. I was also advised to free feed. So there are so many, and I feel like exactly like you said, when we're free feeding, we are feeding kibble. You touched a little bit on the gut-brain axis, the microbiome, all of these things. When it comes down to recognizing that free feeding is not providing our obligate carnivores with a species-appropriate diet, and I think that a lot of I've got a lot of stuff in my head. Can you tell? I think a lot of this really is because I remember this. I think a lot of the defensiveness about this really is about the fact that it's so convenient and it's very difficult to put the effort into figuring out, can I do a good moisture-rich diet at these specific times, commit to that at these specific times and leave out, like we do with our little ones, leave out a little bit of freeze-dried raw for them to snack on during the day if they're hungry, that they can go hunt for, right? What is and I want to get into the research as well, but what is your opinion on, you're a veterinarian, I'm sure you have a lot of people that say, really, well, my vet said,
I used to be that vet because I didn't know better. Like this was before, keep in mind your veterinarian is trained by big pet food companies. We are trained to sell and recommend and promote those foods. So keep that in mind. Like the information we get in vet school and throughout most of your vet careers, unless you find like a different way, like an integrative or holistic way, you're usually going to be recommending that because that's all you know. And that's what you're comfortable with. And so unless they've stepped outside of that realm, that's your vet's go-to. So it's just like antibiotics are a go-to for a lot of times diarrhea, and that doesn't have to always be the case. There's other ways to do things. And two, there's also a lot of money involved in the pet food industry. There's a lot of marketing behind this. So unfortunately, we do have to follow the money. And that's a big thing. And that's a huge controversial thing. I'm sure that'll irritate a lot of people hearing that. I know this community is, more open to that, but that was a hard piece to learn as a veterinarian. Like, wow, I've been recommending a species inappropriate diet to cats for the first part of my career. And now when we switch over to a more species appropriate diet, a less processed food diet, higher protein, the transformation that occurs in my own cat's health, in my clients' like cat's health is unbelievable. And you see it. You see cats do so much better. I've had 2 cats with aggressive GI lymphoma and I fed them garbage. Like it probably contributed before I knew better. And that's something where this is not meant to shame, but the change is the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
The change is the hardest. It's the most uncomfortable. That's what makes us resistant. And 2, cats are cats. So the transition can be very hard and frustrating. I have a senior cat we rescued a couple years ago. She was addicted to kibble. She's been a journey is the best way to put it. Like, God bless her. I've gotten creative with like what we need to feed her. We rotate her diets. She's, she eats some raw, but she gets a lot of like freeze dried, and she does get some canned, because at the end of the day though, I don't leave, we have set feeding times for her. And that is something that it's not necessarily when you're looking at this topic and you're thinking, oh my God, how do I do this? I have multiple cats in my house. It's a transition. So remember, we always talk about this here, like one thing, one step. Like it doesn't have to be this major transformation and change in your house. Sometimes with cats, we have to go more slowly. Kiwi, it took probably almost a year to transition her to a better diet from when she was being fed kibble. So I think that's really important for people to remember. Like it's okay to go slow, but we've got to start getting them used to set feeding times. That will make it easier in the long run. And also looking at feeding that species appropriate diet too.
Yeah. I always say like when you're starting, if you've been feeding your cats for years and years and all day buffet all the time, then
we did as
like
well.
we did.
Oh, we did it too. I know.
Those days, I'll be the first to say it.
Sometimes
those are so easy, right? You could like leave and how awful is this, right? Like you're like, I can go for the weekend and like the cats are good. Like we've all been there probably.
Yes.
For the weekend.
We would go.
I know. We've all done it. Well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of us have done that because we didn't know better, right? It's a journey. And I think too, like it's important to give yourself grace as you continue to learn like new things like this, and you challenge your belief system and like, wow, there's things that I might not be doing well for my cat. Like, it can be hard to release a lot of sometimes that guilt that comes up, but like for everyone here, like it's so awesome that they're here learning. And that's so important to like take those baby steps, start getting used to that change, start taking action. And that's when it becomes a lot easier and you make more forward progress.
Yeah. And I say like, even like those baby steps, that doesn't necessarily mean that like you need to stop feeding kibble immediately, right?
No,
like,
yeah.
All day long.
Your cat's going to be upset with you, by the way, if you do like
right.
That's the hardest thing is when you learn about this and you throw it in the trash and now your cat won't eat and you're worried about them developing like fatty liver disease. Right. So there can be a slow progression, right? Yeah. Just becoming aware of what you can do better is the most important first step.
Yeah, exactly. And then taking that, that same kibble that you put down that you would normally just pour into a bowl and leave there all day, instead break that into smaller meals. So they're still getting the same food. They're still getting the same nutrition. You're just now scheduling them. I have to say that it has been, since we started doing this years ago, it's a bond building time with our cats, right? Like, I mean, we really do strengthen that bond in relationship between ourselves and our cats when we have that scheduled feeding time. And there are studies around that too, I believe. But let's get to the studies.
Yes.
Or have we already talked about obesity?
Not really.
Okay, let's dive into obesity.
Let's start with obesity.
I mean, here's your thing. So the obesity side of things, right? Like you stated, there's 60% of cats that, they're overweight. And, being overweight isn't just being overweight. It creates inflammation in the body. It puts extra pressure on the joints. Then we start seeing joint disease and osteoarthritis. And now our cats can't move around or play or engage. So it has this ripple on effect where it just creates a whole host of issues. Diabetes, the risk of diabetes goes up significantly. It's just the problem with this free feeding and feeding a species inappropriate diet is that we're creating that insulin resistance. And so the other thing too is that there's a lot of toxins in that food. Mm-hmm. And what happens? Where do those toxins go? They get stored in the fat tissue. And it just makes it so much harder for our cats to live that healthy life that we all want. And so if we have food down all the time, we always say, well, cats are really good at self-regulating. Well, how good are you at self-regulating when you have Lay's potato chips in front of you all day and it's a never ending supply and you're like, this is fantastic, right? And you're just snacking and thinking about like the food we're feeding is very similar to a lot of these processed food diets. And it's so easy to see how easy it is for them to gain weight when we think about it that way. This is essentially like Lay's potato chips, right? That they're eating and they're just taking it in, and they're not good at self-regulating. Yes, there's going to be some, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments like, my cat's perfect at self-regulating.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is, if you don't know how to body condition score your cat, start body condition scoring your cat, because a lot of people are unaware that their cats are overweight because we're so used to seeing fat animals. And
because that's a question that we get a lot. Like, how do I know if my cat's fat? Right. Like, I mean, I think that everyone, when we did the cat tip about the primordial pouch, they're like, oh, that's what it is. You know, my cat's not chunky.
Most people said, I have a primordial pouch too.
Well, that might be us being a bit chunky. We don't usually have primordial pouches.
Well,
I can pretend I do, but.
But is body scoring our cats, is that something that we want to do at the next wellness exam with our veterinarian, or is that something that we can figure out kind of at home? What are some of the things that we would look at?
Yeah, this is something that every single pet parent, for your dogs, cats, animals, you should be body condition scoring your pets at home, because you don't want to wait for the annual exam to learn that, like, you know, Fluffy's gained 5 pounds and you're like, well, they were getting a little squishy, you know. And this is where you can empower yourself to have this easy, free tool. We're petting our cat. Who here loves just petting their cat? Like, they're sitting on your lap. They're just gorgeous, right? That's the whole idea behind feline paralysis. The cat sits on your lap and you're like, well, gotta get a good book, or hopefully have my phone or something, you know. But this is where, while your cat is like sitting on you, or you're playing with them, or, you know, you're engaging with them, you can body condition score them. So what does that look like? This is where we're going to run our hands along their side. And so right along the ribs, the chest area, and you should be able to just feel the ribs. It shouldn't feel squishy. So like, if they're starting to feel squishy, that's that extra fat layer that they're putting on. The other thing too is when you run your hand along their back, you shouldn't, this goes either way, right? Too overweight, like obese, or too skinny. It's a great way to assess your cats as they age, especially your senior cats. They tend to lose muscle mass along that back, around their hips. So feeling along the spine, do we have good like tissue coverage, but you know, they're not squishy, right? They're not turning into like an end sofa or an end table, right? We don't want that. We also want to see a good little hourglass shape from the top when we're looking down on them. Now, because of that primordial pouch, we always talk about like a nice tummy tuck. Some cats won't have that. So that's something to be aware of, but we should see a nice figure. We shouldn't feel too squishy when we're assessing them. And there's great body condition score charts out there. So if you just search body condition score chart for cats, it's either on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Either way, you're still assessing those parameters and you can score your pet. And the more you do it and the more you're aware of it, it just becomes super easy and it's like second nature. So you can get an idea like, okay, I'm feeding them a little too much. I need to cut back, or maybe I've been giving a lot of like treats this week because we've been playing a lot and I'm using like food enrichment. So it gives you an idea of where they're at so we can prevent them from becoming obese. Because once you get obese, they start losing motivation for like playing and moving and all of that, right? It's just like us. It gets harder to get out of that vicious cycle. So we want to prevent obesity from occurring in the first place.
Well, and that's where I get that, you know, why I believe that free feeding does lead to obesity more often is because, especially, you know, we free feed and then we leave. So we basically aren't paying as close attention to our cats. We don't have that special bond at food time and things like that. And so our cats are bored. Right. And it's not that it's like no shame that you have a job that you have to work 12 to 14 hours a day. Like, good for you. Like,
I know you guys just play with your cats all day.
Yeah, that's all.
That's all you do.
With our cats. But if you know, like if you have a bored cat, that cat is going to be stressed and that cat is also going to be sleeping a lot. And just like me, if I'm laying in bed, I'm telling you, when Pooh Bear died and we laid in bed for 2 days, all I did was eat. Because I didn't feel like I didn't have that, like, oh, I'm full. Oh, you know, like it was just like and I know there was grief in that, but anytime I lay in bed, I don't feel the same thing until I stand up. And then I'm like, oh.
Well, but let's talk about this too. And this is something that I feel really passionate about. When we're free feeding, we're also not, yes, it's bonding to have scheduled meal times. And we love to put love into the food that we're making for our babies and all of that. And those scheduled meal times also allow us to see what they're eating. I always I feel like one of the most important things that we've learned in our journey, along our journey with our cats, is paying attention to their intake, their eliminations, their energy levels. And because cats are so stoic, they don't say, wow, I feel like shit today, right? What we're going to notice is they're not eating as much, or they don't finish their meal. They're acting a little bit different. Their energy is way down. When's the last time we saw a good healthy poop, right? Like, so when we're doing those scheduled meal times, we can also keep an eye on what their appetite is like. The minute that, and we notice a big change in that, that's a first clue to us, because our cats can't talk to us.
Yeah.
And that all that buffet, especially with multiple cats, you don't know who's eating what.
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing too, I don't know if your cats are like mine, but when we feed them, a lot of times they're going to either go to the bathroom, like Moki, he poops in the middle of eating. Like, I mean, not like where he's eating, but he'll go to the bathroom, he'll go to the litter tray, and he comes back. And
My sister does that.
Oh my God, too much information.
But that's the other thing. Like, it's easier to know who's doing what because we're creating a scheduled routine. It's going to stimulate the GI tract. Our other cat, Tico, announces after he eats, he walks through the house, he's going to the litter box, and I'm like, Tico's gonna go take a poo, but it's like,
poo.
Yeah. And I'm like, but then I can go and look, right? And I scoop the litter, and we know, like, okay, that looks normal for him, and we can keep track of it. And it goes exactly what you said, Adrian. Like, it just becomes one of those things. What are we monitoring? What are we watching? If they're just food down all the time, especially with a multi-cat household, you're not going to know unless you have a camera on that and you're reviewing the footage every day. You're not going to know, especially if you're not home. I mean, I'm home a lot, and I don't know who's eating what if I have food down all the time, because I'm not down there just watching like where the food bowls are. Right. So that's important.
Well, and I just wanted to mention that whole concept to me, because I'm the first to admit I miss the days of the all-day buffet.
Oh, it's easy. Really? Yeah, so, it's less time consuming, right? I mean, how long does it take you to make their food?
About an hour. I mean, well, all said and done.
All said and done.
By the time we pull it out
45 minutes
and
to an hour.
warm it up gently to mouse temperature, and then feed
it
everyone, and then make sure everyone, right? It's mealtime. I mean, can you imagine? Like, it's like back in the day with your family, right? Like, you sit down for dinner, and it's like anyway, that's like us, except. But I wanted to mention that, along with being able to pay attention to their appetite is so important. Their appetite, their energy, their eliminations. Those are just some basic things that can really kind of clue us into where our cats are at. And like you always do mention, I think Julianne and Pam also say this, great to kind of journal, our cats' health, so that we can, it's very hard to see gradual decline, gradual obesity when we're really not paying attention to a lot of those base things. And I wanted to mention that because you were talking about, I call it the body scoring. It's not that, it's body condition score.
Yeah. So like BCS, body condition score. Yeah. So because I always get, questions like how much should they weigh? And I'm like, well, what's their body condition score? Yeah. I honestly don't care as much what your cat weighs versus are they an optimal body condition score? That's really, really important. Obviously, if you're calorie counting or whatever, you do need to know roughly like the weight, but your body condition score is the most important thing. And it becomes, our senior cat, Kiwi, if she decreases her food intake, I feel it along her spine. And I know to make sure that I'm paying more attention to what's going on with her. So it's a great way to make sure that she's not, continuing to drop weight. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? Like, this is a major health issue now. So it's so easy. It's, anyone can do it. It's not major science behind it, right? It's literally putting your hands on your cat and like petting them.
And you don't have to do it every day. It's not.
No, I mean, you've got your hands on your cat usually every day, unless you have a cat that doesn't like being touched, which some people do. That's fine. But make sure you're getting your hands on them. I'd say at least once a week. Yes. And as being aware of that body condition score.
And I want to mention too, one of the things that I think is great when you're putting your hands on them, you can also find new little bumps or lumps or a little, those things are so important. I mean, it's wonderful. Like you said, feeling paralysis. It's the most amazing thing to pet our cat, but to do it with intention and really take advantage of those opportunities to pay attention to where our cats are at.
Yeah, so I want to get into the science and the studies, but real quick, I want to touch on something that we were just saying about. You just said something about mealtime, about how like we're also conditioned as just human beings, right? In many ways, many of us are. I am not, but she is very much so. That food equals happiness, right?
Oh.
So we tend to think that
mother.
yeah, coming from an Italian mother.
So do I.
Right. Okay. So maybe you do too, where it's like, oh,
mealtime is happy time, is family time, is all the good stuff.
Right. So like
anything happens, you get together and eat.
Are you sad? Here's some food. Are you
Yeah.
are you bored? Here's some food. You know, like it's always like a
not
happiness. Food equal no, to me, I eat for sustenance. Like I'm like, okay, I need to eat to stay alive, right? Like
that's why we wear different sizes.
We grew up in different family households. That's fine. Yeah. Everything's fine. But Marge has a great question here, and I think this will kind of like dive us into research as well.
And Dr. Kitty, I want to let you know, Marge, I saw your comment a little bit earlier. She feeds her babies a Viva Raw once a day. And then she asked, what is your view on intermittent and once a day feeding?
Intermittent fasting and once a day feeding.
Yes.
Okay, that's a great question. And here's the piece to this. There's not a ton of science on the animal side for this. Yeah. So keep that in mind. We have a lot more science and research on the human side and the benefits of intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is that with intermittent fasting for cats, you could see potentially the benefit of, you know, what it's doing essentially is putting the body into what we call autophagy, where there's going to be like cleansing waves that come through that GI tract to clear out like dead cells and, you know, inflammation and help with that healing. And it's going to do things for detoxification. There's a lot of benefits for it depending on the amount of time you're fasting for on the human side. Now, dogs and cats are very different, right? Cats are not small dogs. And so this is where when we look at, to me personally, so take this with whatever grain of salt you would like. To me personally, when I think about the natural behaviors of cats, I wouldn't do intermittent fasting daily for cats. It may be something like once a week.
Right. I wouldn't do intermittent fasting.
I wouldn't do intermittent fasting every day for a cat because...
Let's explain what intermittent fasting is for.
Okay. So intermittent fasting is going to be something where you're going, it's a break from when you're eating food. So if you're free feeding, you're not going to have a break, right? They can go and eat whenever they want. Mm-hmm. So the principle behind it is you're taking a 10-hour, 12-hour, some people do 24-hour, right? Once a day feeding is a 24-hour fast before you break that fast with food. So fasting from food, obviously not fasting from water. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Make sure your pets have access to water. But I would say based on cats and the way that their prey, like they're eating, you know, 8 to 9 mice out in the wild and they're getting small meals, I wouldn't necessarily do a 24-hour fast, like I said, every single day. I think once a week, it can give them a break. However, I'd want to see, once again, not that I know of, there might be some research articles. Maybe you guys have some on like intermittent fasting. Okay.
I don't have them, but there are a few, but not a 24-hour fast. Right.
Okay. So this is where like overnight or you're doing like during the day when you're at work. Yes. And that's where you give the body a break from food.
You think about how slow a cat's digestive tract is, right? And the idea behind it, I've learned that the idea behind like fasting our cats or our dogs, and dogs can go much longer than cats, right? We never want to go. I don't recommend going 24 hours and not feeding your cat at all. But the idea behind it is that the body, while it's digesting food, it cannot do the things that the body needs to do, like restore and replace and rejuvenate, all the things that you said when it came to the cells and the big words. But when it comes to our cats, I say, especially senior cats, I feel like, like an 8 to 10 to 12-hour fasting period, which is usually just overnight, right? Like you feed them at 5 and then you don't feed them again until 5 or 6 in the morning. So that's a fasting period. It's not hard, right? It's not hard for us as humans because we're going to be sleeping during the majority of that time anyway. But that time, giving them their bodies that time to rejuvenate and restore and replace and, heal itself if it needs to be healing, then that is what I consider intermittent fasting for cats specifically. The 24-hour thing, I'm like, don't go 24 hours, don't go 48 hours. Like, I know that some cats are going to be absolutely fine going 48 hours.
I think too,
This is not obese, right?
The what?
Especially if they're not obese. The obese cats actually have a higher risk of hepatic lipidosis, right? The fatty liver disease, which is what we fear as cat parents in starving our cats or fasting our cats too long.
Yeah. And keep in mind too, your hepatic lipidosis, it is definitely something. This is why cats can get sick if they're fasting for they're not eating or they're sick, right? And they go like 3 days, then they're going to build up fat in the liver and they can become jaundice. And it's a vicious cycle. It's very hard to get cats. They have to be hospitalized. Usually there's feeding tubes involved. Like it is quite a process to bring a cat back from that state. It can be done, but we don't want to get there. And so this is where I agree with you, Jay, 100%. Like these shorter periods of fasting for your cats it seems to fit in more with the physiology of the cat. Whereas dogs, a 24-hour fast, 100%. It mimics more of like nature and what they're made to do in their physiology. But our cats they're made to have these like small meals at set times, throughout the day or throughout the night, right? Dusk and dawn, based on their behaviors. And so if we're going too long in between, I think that may potentially create, and not every pet, this could be working beautifully for, the person that wrote that comment. But it could potentially lead to things where you are getting redirected aggression or you're getting other behavioral issues potentially because of that too long of a fast for your household.
Yeah, I know this one specific study on which I think Marge is probably, I don't know if you're part of the Inside Scoop or you've like read this study, but there was a study that came out and it went a little bit viral.
Yeah.
And it was talking about, and like lots of like hate on it.
They always get lots of hate.
Lots of hate when you're like, don't feed your cat an all-day buffet.
The positive word for that is lots of engagement.
And lots of engagement. Let's say that.
Yeah.
It was a study that was done on cats specifically and talking about getting their entire caloric intake in one meal in a 24-hour period. So giving your cats and then they did the research study, and I don't have it and I don't remember all of the results, but it was showing positive results for feeding your cats their entire caloric intake in one meal, which I don't understand how that necessarily.
Can you imagine the amount of vomiting that a lot of these
cats are
like? I mean, I could see. And I want to go back through. I'm sure it's an Inside Scoop to download. To just find it. But the thing is like this goes along with like any studies too. Like, it may work for certain animals, it may not work for others. Like there's always like you always have to assess your personal situation and your individual pet too. So like everything I say, next week there could be a study that like disregards everything I say. So take it with a grain of salt, but also think about things critically too, because that's exactly like thinking about these cats and thinking about, oh my God, I can't even imagine like having to get all of the caloric requirements in for like Kiwi. That'd be a nightmare. It wouldn't work. Yeah. It would be a freaking nightmare. Like, and she's a senior cat too. So we also have to look at the life stages and also like, do they have any health conditions? Keep in mind when we're talking about this, if your pet has a health condition, like Jay said, if you have an overweight cat, obese cat, a diabetic cat, some of those requirements might change based on what their bodies need and their medical requirements and things like that. So that's really important. The other thing, I'm seeing Tony's comment, I just want to comment, like anytime you do blood work, if you can fast your cat for at least 8 hours, please do, because it can affect the blood values. It could affect lipases. It can affect the way certain parameters look on the blood work. So that's a great time to do a fast if you can, before you do blood work for your cat. So I just wanted to comment on that because I know we're talking about fasting, but
That's and a great reminder too. I mean, I think, and to get back to this, the free feeding thing, I know that I think there's vast majority of us cat people do the free feeding thing. And I just want to, for anyone that's just tuning in real quick into this conversation, and we're kind of digging in deep, and we're about to bring up a study that is really exciting and encouraging for all of us. But I do think it's so important to remind people, this is not about being like, oh my God, it's so bad to free feed my cats, I got to stop it. This is about, like Jay said, this is what we did when we first realized, not only is it important to give our obligate carnivores a more species appropriate, moisture rich diet, but it can be amazing to give them a routine, to give them a sense of routine. That's part of like it's almost like a resource to them. So the little things that we can do is just start by picking up the all-day buffet when we're heading to bed. Like that's just step one. It doesn't mean that's the end of the kibble. It doesn't mean that's the end of them having food for the whole next day. Nope. It's just the beginning. And that little fast, like you just said, Tony, great question. Is it better to fast? And like you said, Dr. Katie, yes, anytime that we can fast 8 hours before blood work so that we can get a really clean sample, because different foods can affect different blood work. That's what we would always schedule when we had to do blood work. We would schedule it for first thing in the morning, so that it's as painless as possible for everybody. We take the thing that needs blood work. After the vet we go, everyone else gets breakfast kind of on time. So, but let's talk about this study. This is I can't believe we're already almost running out of time.
Oh my God. I just had something else that I wanted to say and I just forgot it. Okay.
Let's talk about baby steps, picking up the all day buffet.
Oh yeah. So when we started this, we were all day buffet feeding, right? And this is for anybody that is like, I don't know where to start. Cause I can't tell you how many, like hundreds, literally, Dr. Katie, hundreds of how do I stop free feeding? How do I stop free feeding? Like, it was like, how do I stop? I don't even know how to stop. What we did was exactly what she said. The first step was just like literally before you go to bed, just like pick it up, throw it away, or put it back in if it's fresh. But whatever, still like just do away with it overnight. And then in the morning, and this mainly happened because not because we learned about the free feeding thing, but because we had learned about supplements and we knew the amount of, at that time, because it was 2005, right? 2006. And we had just learned like about the pet food industry, and we knew nothing about raw food at that time. We just knew that processed food was missing so many nutrients and that we could potentially replace those nutrients with supplements. And that doesn't come to our cats.
Moisture rich.
We can't do that with our cats unless we give them a wet food diet, right? Like at that time, it was only like still processed, but we can do it in a wet food. So we would pick up the food at night and then in the morning, and they got so excited because in the morning they were hungry and we were giving them like a special treat. So all of our cats got a special treat with their supplements in it with wet food around the house. And then we put down the all day buffet and left for the day. Right. But I mean, and that was just the first step, but it was a great step. It was actually a fantastic step to take for our cats at that point in time before we learned better and did better. Right. But these are small steps, baby steps that you can take. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not about some crazy big change.
Yeah. And each cat is a little different, right? That's the other thing. Like, so utilizing some of these steps and then seeing what works best for your pets. But
that's a big component though. Let's be honest about that. I mean, when we started really implementing the fact that we were going to be changing our cats to a more species appropriate diet, and we went from the all day buffet kibbles to a canned food and then over to our fully balanced raw diet. Every cat's an individual. I think that that's so important that we remember that. And I know that some people are like, but I don't have time to figure out my cat's personalities. I don't have time to figure that. it's part of the equation though. And it's such an important part of the equation.
And understanding them, right? Like our
Yeah.
18-year-old at the time when we switched over to raw food, it was because of our 18-year-old
Scotch.
And he was like, he took to raw food like immediately. It was like a week, and it could have been a day, maybe, but we transitioned him, and he was like ready for it.
And
Within
no
a
GI
week,
upset
he was
either.
ready. And our youngest at the time, who happened to be Pooh Bear, he was like 7 or something, 6 or 7. And he was the hardest. It took him 6 months to get off that kibble, right? Like it was
hard.
It was
more challenging.
Yeah, I know. It's the same with our cats. One of our cats with aggressive GI lymphoma. So this was probably like 7, 8 years ago. And this was like when I was like, wow, I'm feeding not a species appropriate diet. My cats are getting GI lymphoma. This is no good. And we transitioned him immediately to raw. And he had cancer too. And he took right to it. And I was like, interesting, right?
What a great study. That study that was done over in Japan or the UK. The UK a couple years ago, basically showing
2016.
Oh my God, 2016.
It's almost 10 years ago. Isn't that insane?
No, I don't know. Anyway, I can't do years math. Basically showing that cats, given the opportunity, so that's all this is for us humans, right? It's when we know better, we can do better, we can offer our cats more options. And this study showed that cats over time will choose the more nutritional food where they know that what their body needs. Interesting that your cat and our cat at the time instant transitions, because it was like, oh my God, this is what my body needs, and super fast about it.
I see Marge's comment. He'd have me on a 600-pound life.
A buffet or a cruise, they'd be having me on my 600-pound life.
I'd be on my 1,000-pound sister's life. Mr. Milligan, again, this is so great again. We're talking about body conditioning score. We're talking about keeping an eye on our cat's appetite, their eliminations, their energy, and routine feeding times are so foundational for that. And he said one of the best tools for figuring out the best care routines for our cats is just observation. It's really that simple.
Just paying attention.
Yes.
Paying attention to our cats. So let's get into the studies a little bit. Now, this is one of my favorite studies ever that was done on cats. And I know that like there are a ton, and I know that I've brought this up a lot, but it was done in by
show it again. You have to show it again because people didn't see it.
Ohio State University. Showing that even healthy cats act sick when their routine is disrupted. So showing that, and this study, it goes into, and I have stuff like highlighted for a different, I think about it Thursday, but they did a study on several cats. I don't know how many were in here. I should have read it before I came in.
It's showing is that this is really the science, some of the science that's so important and empowering for people that are like, oh my God, I have to free feed my cat all the day. Otherwise, they'll become food aggressive. And that is behavioral issues. And like you said about the microbiome and the gut brain axis and all of that, all things, especially when we're not feeding our obligate carnivores a species appropriate diet to begin with. This study is so beautiful because it shows that a routine for a cat reduces their stress levels.
Yes.
So when we are able to evaluate our schedules as humans, right, and to the best of our ability, pick routine feeding times that we're able to provide a bonding experience of making food with joy and love for our clouder, and they know that they're going to get fed every morning at 7 a.m. They're going to get fed every night at 7:30. And in the meantime, they're going to be able to, around, we call it lunchy time.
12:30. Yep, they tell us every time. 12:30. They're like, right. Come on, where's my snackaroo?
Thank you, Belladonna. She left in the comments here. Ohio State University study, even healthy cats except when their routine is disrupted.
Yes.
This is what's so wonderful. And this is what we, when we're able to put our cats on a routine, mealtime, it can actually really reduce stress markers. They know that they're going to be getting food at this time. Their bodies adjust. That circadian rhythm. I remember that conversation with Dr. Karen Becker about, everyone saying, how do I get my cat to stop waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning? And it's about gradual adjustments. Same as this. If we want to stop free feeding, it's about baby steps. It's about just moving the needle a little bit. If we want to adjust,
if they're waking you up at 4 a.m.,
when their bodies know they're hungry,
get up at 4:15 and feed them. And then they're waking you up at 4:15 every morning. Get up at 4:30. And then they're waking you up at 4:45. Like, go in these small increments to where they're now on your schedule.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to say too with that, because that's a huge, concern for a lot of people, right? That waking up, I have to get up and feed them. Like, they won't stop meowing. Have some good earplugs next to your bed. Like, honestly, and you can put those earplugs in and just sit there and meditate for 15 minutes or think about something else. But that's exactly right. Like what you're saying, Jay, like 15 minutes, like we can withhold food for 15 minutes, right? And this is also too, going into that study and the routine side of things, it lowers stress. It takes them out of that sympathetic dominant, like fight or flight response, because they're not worried about when or if they're going to be fed. And two, who here in the comments, I'd love to see you comment on this, who here doesn't actually need an alarm clock? Right? Because they are so good at routine. You guys stated it. They know they're getting the lunchy munchies at 12:30. Like, we know, like 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. are the times, like meal times in this household. And then they'll get some little snackies at, in the evening before we go to bed. They'll get their like little freeze dried hearts or livers or, kidneys and things like that. But they know, they get up and they tell me, I'm like, oh, it's 9 o'clock. Like, it's time for bed and we're going to help them. Okay. Yep. 5 o'clock. They're sitting outside our door, letting us know. And 5 p.m. they're letting us know. They're super happy right now. Well, one is because my husband already fed them. Like, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where routine is key. Routine is key for your cat's health. And this is where you can implement those scheduled feeding times and really bring back that routine for them in a fun way too, and in an engaging way, and cultivating that your relationship with them, and also being observant of what's going on and how they're behaving. Like, oh, like Fluffy's not eating today. Why aren't they here? Why aren't they coming? Whereas we wouldn't know that if we just had the all-day buffet down for them.
I want to add, and this is actually going to say, because I was just thinking, Marilyn Bickle commented, "I love you so much, Marilyn." Jack says hi. I don't know if you heard him earlier. She said yes. So when we're talking about these meal times, what came to mind was just how we love our cats like family members, right? And it is about, back to my upbringing, you have mealtime together, right? Like, it is a beautiful thing. And Marilyn is hitting on something that I'm so excited that we're going to be covering this weekend a bit in the Holistic Cat Conference. She said, yes, recently I've been putting down individual plops of food in the cat's bowls. I love that you say plops. I saw the comment about a gnat's butt earlier. Thank you for that. And I let them choose what they want/need. I love doing that. It taught me a lot. The power of self-selection. So not only when we get rid of free feeding, we're getting rid of food monotony. We're getting rid of a lot of stuff. And when we give them options, Marilyn's talking about that power of watching our cats, like Rob said, the power of observation. When we give our cats options, when we give them variety and all of that, it teaches us so much. It's not about doing extra work. We love them like family members. We love them as family members, not like family members. That's Blue Buffalo. I'm sorry.
Which we do not endorse.
Do not feed that food. It will probably give your pet diarrhea. The first question I would ask every client that would come in that had a pet that was having diarrhea was, are you feeding that food? I won't say the name again, just in case they come at us. But it was it was so much diarrhea. And I was like, this is not good. Not good.
Did we ever tell you that one time Blue
They
Buffalo
reached
reached out to us to promote their cat food.
And we're like,
we
they
were
have
like,
off.
you did not do your research.
They did not consume
No,
it.
it's fascinating, isn't it? It's like, yeah, definitely don't feed that food.
But
So-
it's extra heartbreaking for me just because I feel like
The
heartbreaking.
commercials are awesome.
Their commercials.
Well,
are
once
good.
again, it goes back to the marketing, right? This is what vets are being fed. We are being spoon-fed this in vet school. Vet schools are sponsored and funded by these big pet food companies. So of course they're going to promote their products. As a poor vet student with my animals, they're like, here's free food or discounted food. And I'm like, oh, this is great, And then they're like essentially brainwashing you to be like, well, my pet didn't die while it was on this food during these 4 years I was in vet school, so it must be good, right? And you just don't know. And it's this vicious cycle. So it goes back to everything that we've been talking about, where ideally species appropriate diets, but there's also ways like through this, getting rid of the all day buffet and doing scheduled feedings is going to be, even if you had to feed kibble, will be better for your cat than putting food down all day long. So
Yes.
they all come together. All of these factors play a part for optimizing your cat's health. And once again, it doesn't have to be a crazy transformation that has to happen in the next week. Taking that one step,
Yep.
changing things one thing at a time and doing it that in the way that works for you and works for your cats, because we're all individuals. We're all going to do it a little bit differently. And that's the beauty of it.
Yes, absolutely. And a shout out to Rachel Fasaro, who is here this evening, my hero, my best friend, and my love. If you guys have a dog, we might be twins. In another life, I think we were twins, but if you guys have a dog, you have to follow Rachel Fasaro. She knows everything, anything.
She's so helpful. Incremental things for everything.
Save all them damn dogs.
Yeah,
Save all the damn dogs.
Save all the damn dogs. I want one of those T-shirts still. What a beautiful human. And I know that so many of us cat lovers also have dogs. We don't.
And dog lovers also have cats,
and
like
dog
Haven, who's 18.
Like Haven. Oh, love you. Rachel, I love you so much. I can't wait to see you this year.
Robin said alarm clock. Yes. I have an alarm clock. Adrian's like, I don't need an alarm clock. Yeah, you do.
Oh,
or you don't wake up. Like, she's like, I don't need one because I could sleep all day.
Check this out, Marge. I love your comments tonight. She said, my cat used to wake me up all the time. Now that he is on a routine, I have to wake him up.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, it's funny because Zorro, this little girl's twin sister or twin brother. He sleeps. He comes up when he is hungry in the morning. Like, he knows that I'm gonna make breakfast. So he lays on me and causes feline paralysis. Right. So I'm like, I can't get up. But I know that you're only laying on me because you want me to get up and you're hungry. So I always have to get up and I have to like kiss his head. And I'm like, are you hungry? And then he's like, yes. It's like a routine every morning. Tell me, Dr. Katie, do you have any studies that you would like to bring up on free feeding versus scheduled feeding for cats other than the Ohio State University one?
I mean, there's a lot of, I would say, for pet parents to like dive into like more research, especially around like the environmental enrichment component. Going to that Ohio State University website is so awesome. And learning about like these structures, these routines, the free feeding versus scheduled feeding. It's a wealth of amazing resources for cat like parents. So I definitely think starting there, there's a lot of great researches too, in terms of or research articles in terms of looking at, the obesity and overeating. I can find some articles and list them below in the links in the comment area, so you can go back and continue to educate yourself. I think the biggest thing here too is keep in mind, once again, going back to what is a species appropriate diet, because there's a lot more studies coming out showcasing that and how it impacts overall health and gut health and other areas of the body, lowers the risk of obesity, can reduce inflammation with osteoarthritis. So there are things out there to help guide you. So I'll share some of those in the comments section after the live for everyone.
And I know we're already over time, but I do want to, I want to do 2 shout outs. I feel like, I'm so encouraged. I'm so grateful for all the new resources that are coming out for all of us cat people that are cat specific. This weekend, you guys, if you haven't already registered, please. I don't think it's linked in the
description, but link is in our bio.
Link is in our bio to the Holistic Cat Conference this weekend. This is going to be such an empowering weekend for all of us cat people. It is all about cats.
Dr. Katie Woodley is speaking. We are honored to also be speaking at this event. It is going to be Dr. Judy Moore. I mean,
there's so
many amazing,
so many things I'm excited to learn about too.
Yes.
We're
going to wake up at 2 a.m.
Yeah, we are. It starts at 10 a.m. UK time, which I believe is 2 a.m. But you guys, go check the link out in the bio. It is a free webinar. It's going to be live on Zoom if you want to be a part of it. There is a VIP package that you can get so that you can have all the recordings, all the downloadable PDFs, all that stuff and things. And Dr. Katie, you also offer an amazing resource for pet parents that is basically a course that people can be a part of, membership. If people are really ready to kind of dive in with all the baby steps, tell everyone a little bit about.
Yeah. So essentially one of our big missions was, years ago, the reason why I found holistic medicine was because my husband developed an autoimmune disease, and we were told there was nothing else you can do. And through those years of going in the rabbit hole and learning there's this amazing way, another way of medicine that we can integrate into our pet's care, I became an integrative, holistic veterinarian. And because of that, I was able to help our pet who developed a brain tumor and seizures gain another amazing quality year of life when we were given a week for him to live. So I'm on a crazy mission to make sure that you are not being told there's nothing else that you can do. And what we've done is that a lot of pet parents are feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, confused on what steps to take and to implement to truly figure out what are the root imbalances? How do I optimize health? How do I heal the body so that we can get our cats to 30 years old? We can get our dogs to 20 years old. And that's a totally doable thing. So we've created a program for pet parents. It's a lifetime blueprint program that teaches you those foundations through an educational platform, and then also includes weekly Q&As with myself to ask personal questions and a private community where you can get support and guidance so you never have to feel alone on this journey again. And it's just been an amazing community, watching it grow and flourish and supporting people and watching the results that they get, and then the confidence too. So to go to your vet and ask the questions, get the right testing done, make sure you feel like you're on the right path and you're doing all that you can to help both your dogs and your cats. So we do have a link for our blueprint program. It's an application program to make sure it's a good fit for what you're looking for and those next steps that you're looking for your pets. And I know Jay and Adrian also have a link, but if you have any questions, just reach out to info@thenaturalpetdoctor.com. And we also have a free masterclass that you can watch ahead of time to get a better idea of kind of the foundations and how we teach and how that program's set up.
Yep, thenaturalpetdoctor.com.
I love so much that you utilize your journey as a human being to recognize that this will impact your patients as well. That what happened with your husband and realizing, oh my God, I can be treating my patients differently as well. Just that whole concept of learning. I want to shout out.
We already have
Madison.
Our in the blueprint program Madison. Here tonight that are saying that is excellent.
And I want to say another shout out to Marge. She said, thanks for sharing all your wealth of knowledge. Love it. I think it's so amazing to have these communities where we can all learn, share, and grow together. And I really feel like it's one of the things that's beautiful about your program is that empowerment aspect. We've been through a lot lately, and we've been asking you questions. We're not veterinarians, so there are a lot of questions that are going to pop up when our cats are at different stages in their lives, and it's so empowering to be able to know the right questions to ask, know the right tests to run, know what maybe this or that means. It is an incredible gift. Your blueprint program. I'm very excited for the Holistic Cat Care Cat Conference this weekend with Julianne and all the amazing guests. You guys, there are so many tools and resources and gifts out there for us cat people now to learn how to best love our babies.
Yes. So thank you,
so grateful.
Dr. Katie. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. I'm so grateful. And thanks for everyone here learning. We couldn't do this without the amazing cat parents, pet parents that want to learn and grow and just do the best that we can. So thank you for everyone taking time out of your evening day, morning, wherever you're at. Like, I truly appreciate it. And Jane, Adrian, thank you for all that you do. You guys are amazing, incredible. Love you both.
I
We love
you
you
so much.
All right,
Thank you guys for joining us.
We'll
We'll
see
see
you
you guys soon.